Hey, what's up everyone? Mark Price here, devslopes.com. If you've ever said to yourself, I really wish someone would teach me how to make a navigation bar, well, today is your lucky day because that is what we're going to be doing. I'm trying to make it sound more exciting than it probably actually is, but it will be cool because if you've ever built navigation bars or if you've ever built any type of web code, what you typically do, or at least for code that's going to be on multiple pages, is you'll write code. So in the case of a website, you'll write a navigation bar. And then if you have multiple pages, you'll copy and paste that code onto each page. Well, that's bad for a few reasons. What happens if you need to make one change to the code on it? Well, you got to go and copy and paste it again on all the pages. Or if you want to modify one of the navigation bars slightly, okay, but you don't want to modify the others, well, now you've got code that's different from other code, and now we don't have to worry about that anymore because you can customize and build your own navigation bar with React, and we are going to do that with Bootstrap. Okay, you should already have Bootstrap installed, and here is the end product. Okay, product shop, that's the logo there. You've got a few links here, and they are clickable. These will probably change later on, the actual wording in them, but we're just building out the framework for it. And if you scroll in, you can see there's a navigation button right there. That's all Bootstrap, but we've wrapped it in React so it can be highly reusable. So let's go ahead and get to work. So I'm going to open up my project. You should have yours open already. There we go. Okay. So let's do some cleanup here. I think we still have some components left over from the skeleton project. You may have deleted yours already. I'm going to get rid of list. And I'm going to get rid of list item.jsx. Okay, so let's think about what we're going to do here. We're going to build a Bootstrap navigation bar. So how does it work? Okay, let's go to getbootstrap.com and let's click on components. I'm going to Command F to find nav bar. There it is. I'll click the right hand side. Okay, we've got a navigation bar and it shows you examples of how to use it. I'm not going to explain every little detail of Bootstrap and how to use it. You can do that on your own. Research it, but I'm pointing this out to you as a reference because we will be using this method here with the navbar default, navbar collapse. You can get it right here from their website. So getbootstrap.com/components #navbar. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using for our reference. And when I was going through this, I just looked at this just to make sure I was doing it correctly. Okay, so let's go on and get to it. We know that we're going to need a navigation bar, and we know that a navigation bar is going to have list items. And I'm thinking what I want to do is dynamically allow a developer to pass in data into that navigation bar, such as like the actual titles and the URLs that the links go to. So how cool is that? You could write a component with your navbar, and then you can redistribute it to other developers, and then they can pass in their own data into it. And I'm just showing this to you because of the possibilities that are available to you here with React. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new folder in source. And we're going to call this, new folder, we're going to call this nav. Okay, and let's go ahead and create a nav bar. So a new file. I'm going to call this navbar.jsx. Okay, var react as normal. Let's import react equals require react. Okay, then we're going to say var navbar equals react.createClass. Okay, all familiar stuff to you so far. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I do the module.exports now. It's very common when I'm doing React development that I'll forget this part, and I'm thinking there's a bug because it's giving me an error and I don't know what to do, and I realize I forgot to export it. So navbar. So it is being exported, and if you remember right, we need a render function like so. Okay, so what is it going to look like? What is our nav bar going to look like? Well, we have to build it the way that it's specified in Bootstrap because we want to do it the Bootstrap way. Okay, so all I'm going to do is build out just like I would build out the Bootstrap version, except we're going to change a few things around to make it work with React. So here we go. Since Bootstrap uses the nav element, okay, we could just leave it as it is. But I'm going to wrap it in a div just because it seems a little bit cleaner to me. I don't think you have to, but I like the way it looks. So I just didn't want the nav as the outer one. Okay, even though it's an arbitrary element. So All right, so what do we want to do here? We want to have our nav bar. So the Bootstrap class that we want to use is navbar-default. Okay, that is a standard Bootstrap navigation bar, and that's going to style it and do other things to it. Okay, so again, this highly is coupled with Bootstrap. If you're very unfamiliar with Bootstrap, go look at the class names. Okay, if you're not using Bootstrap or highly against Bootstrap, you could be doing the same thing here, just with your own styling and code. Okay, we're just giving it a class name, which is of course is the way that you do it with React. You say class name. Okay, then we're gonna have an inner div where there's gonna be a navbar header. Okay, and the header is, well, what is it? It's kind of just the button that you click on with the 3 lines like I showed you, where it expands and retracts. We're gonna have to put that in there, and also I think it's gonna have we're gonna want to put the actual like name of the company or whatever logo on the left hand side. That's gonna be as part of the header as well too. This again is a Bootstrap class here. So let's go ahead and handle the button now. Remember that button that when you make it smaller, it automatically has those three little lines that you can see in the menu. Uncollapses, okay, or expands. Uncollapse, it's not even a word, is it? Expands. So that's what we're doing here. So we're making a button, and it's of type button. Class name is equal to navbar-toggle. Again, this is a Bootstrap class, okay, navbar toggle and collapsed. Okay, that is a Bootstrap class. I'm not just making this stuff up, I promise. So, and again, you can look at that from that example code on the website. And by the way, this does require the JavaScript, that Bootstrap JavaScript file, which requires jQuery, so it won't work without that. And data toggle, okay. This is the data that's going to be toggled. And then we need to lastly set the data target. Data target, this is the ID of the element to be collapsed. And we're just going to call ours nav collapse. This data target is not a Bootstrap thing. Well, the actual class that we're specifying here, the ID, the nav-collapse, that's something that we are going to define, so as not to be confused. So there's our button, and in this button with Bootstrap, again, this is still Bootstrap that we're doing here, okay? We want to set the span, 3 spans, 1 for each of those line items. This is where the graphics are going to come in. So let's just go ahead and set those now. Span class name equals icon-bar, okay, and then end the span. And let's just copy and paste this 3 times. So all we're saying here is inside this button, let's make 3 of these little icon bars. And you know how the class name says icon-bar? That is Bootstrap. That line that you see is Bootstrap. So we're just saying inside of this button, let's make 3 of those lines just for the graphic effect, okay? That's what we're doing right here. Nothing crazy, out of control, complex here. So there's our button. And it looks like we are missing the end div here. So let's go ahead and fix that now. And let's put the end nav so we don't forget that as well too. Okay, so there's our button. Now we want the logo. Ours is just a word logo. We're gonna put that on the left-hand side. So let's do that now. And it's gonna be a link, so an A. And what we're gonna do is say class name equals navbar-brand, href equals, for now we'll just make it a pound sign so it doesn't do anything. And let's call ours product shop. You can call yours whatever you want if you are making your own e-commerce type website, but ours is going to be called product shop. Ooh. Okay, so we've got a nav bar. That's looking good. One thing I did forget to do is return this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So let's go ahead and return it. I'm going to use the parentheses here. I'm going to highlight all this, Command X to cut it, and I'm going to paste it here and put an exclamation, or excuse me, a semicolon here. Okay, so that is our basic nav bar. I'm curious if it's working. So let's go ahead and open up our terminal here. And let's see, are we running this already? Okay, we are already running it. It looks good to me. If you're not running it already, just inside of your directory here, npm start, and it will compile your code. Cannot find module components list.jsx. Ha, see? It's telling us where our problem is. We have not linked it up in our main.jsx. It is still looking for a list. So we want a navbar. Navbar equals require, and it's in components. Yes. No, it's actually, I put it in the wrong spot. Ladies and gentlemen, let's close out of this. I'm going to drag the nav folder here into components where it should be. Now what I'm going to do is it's going to say components /nav/navbar.jsx. And maybe you're wondering, Why did I make a subfolder for navigation? Well, it's going to have a few different files, and I think that if you have a few different files that are tightly related to each other, you should put them in their own folder, because what happens if you have like 500 script files for components? You're not going to want to dig through all of them. You're going to want to logically break that up. So that's all I've done there. And I'll change this to navbar as well. And document.getElementById ingredients, that doesn't seem appropriate. Let's go to index.html, and we're going to change ingredients into, I'm just going to call it nav. The ID is going to be called nav. Let's clean this up a little here. Okay, so we've got a nav bar there. And so instead of ingredients, I'm going to say nav. Let's open up the terminal, command space. And it looks like it rendered or interpreted or compiled, whatever you want to say. JavaScript's an interpreted language, but it seems like we often like to say compiled. So there it is. Let's go ahead and look it up in the browser. Okay, public index.html. Product shop. So there it is. Although I'm not seeing, okay, so it looks like there is some styling on the nav bar. It's just really hard to see. It's white right now. As you can see, it's like maybe like a light gray there. So it is pretty bland here. And I think that's because we did a default navbar. If we go into our navbar.jsx, instead of navbar default, if I set it to navbar primary just for testing, and then I refresh this page, okay, so now this is blue. Okay, so that's coming along there. I think what we need to do is add the navbar class here. I think it's navbar and the navbar dash default again. I think we were just missing this. Let's give it a shot. Let's save that. Okay, there you go. So you can see it there. Make it bigger for you. See, there is some shadowing. Looks fine. Okay, cool stuff. And if you don't know what I'm doing command plus, command minus. That increases and decreases the screen size. Every time I do this, somebody always asks me. So there's your answer. So our nav bar is there in place. When we scroll in, the button is there. Okay, as you can see, that 3 buttons right there, the 3 little slashes, that is right here in our spans. Okay, of course, we don't have any links yet to go on the nav bar, which we do want. And it's kind of bland, so we need to take care of some coloring and things as well too. But let's just make sure our links will actually work on here in our nav bar. So, and we'll make it, and then we'll make it so you can pass data into it too, so it's more dynamic. Really cool. All right, so that looks good. That looks good. So we got a nav bar. Let's go ahead and create a nav item now. And right here in the nav folder on the left-hand side, new file. We're gonna call this navitem.jsx. Okay, same as usual. Var react equals require react. Okay, and then var nav item equals react dot create class, and module dot exports, so we don't forget it, equals nav item. And then don't forget your render function. And then of course we'll return our JSX like so. There's some boilerplate code for you right there. Okay, so nav item. What is a nav item going to look like? Well, a nav item is going to have a title, okay, and it's going to have a URL, and also we want the hovering effect on it. When you hover over it, it gets colored. So let's go ahead and do all those things right now. So, reacte. You didn't know I was teaching this in French, did you? Okay, so an item. So we know it's going to be a list item, right? Like so. And so first off, let's just do a test run. It's always good to just to test and get the most minimal thing working. So there's our test list item. And of course, in order for a list item to show, we need to put that inside of a UL. And so let's do that here under the navbar header. Okay, we need to have another div actually. Let's see, under the header here, so another div. Class name equals, okay, this is going to be bootstrap class, collapse navbar collapse. So these are the items inside of the navigation bar that can be collapsed. ID equals nav dash collapse. Okay, this is what I was telling you about earlier. If you look over here, how I set the data target, the ID to nav dash collapse. This is the name that I chose for it. You can call it whatever you want. I recommend not calling it something that's identical to the Bootstrap classes, just in case there is a conflict, but that's the data target. So we're saying the target of our collapsible is this ID right here. Again, that is all Bootstrap. So if you're wanting me to explain more how Bootstrap works, you can just look at the documentation and it'll explain everything much better than I could. So there's the ID nav collapse, and let's make an ending div. Okay, and what we want to do is put our UL in here. Class name is going to be navbar -nav. We're just setting, again, a Bootstrap class to make this look as it should look. And we're going to end that UL here. Okay, so we're going to have a list of items here. How about in this case, we just run a test. So I'm going to say, oh, we haven't imported yet, have we? Nope. Let's go ahead and import our list, our nav item here. So var nav item equals require, and we're going to say, since it's in the same directory, /nav item.jsx. Let's import that nav item that we just created. And here in the UL, all we need to do is put that item right here where it belongs. So right in between the UL, let's go ahead and put the curly braces here, okay? And we're going to say nav item, and just add the element like so. If I open my terminal, it looks like it has been written and compiled. So let's go open our browser. And that's not the browser that I wanted. I lost my page here. There we go. Okay, as you can see, the test is right there. It is looking a little bit ugly because I didn't put any Bootstrap classes on it, but it definitely is there in our navigation bar. So let's go ahead and keep cleaning it up. So that's a nav item. That's cool. But we want this to be dynamic, right? We want the user to be able to pass in whatever data that they want into the navigation bar. So that would be an array of objects that has titles and links on those URLs. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's pretend that we have the data, and we're going to define that data. So I'm going to go over to main.jsx. Okay, and let's think about what we would want to pass into our nav bar so it could get passed down into our list items. So I'm thinking that a developer who wants to use our highly reusable component is going to want to pass in some data. So I'm going to say var nav links. This is just a JavaScript array that's going to be full of objects. And we're going to say title. Each one has a title, and each one has a link, like so. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, I want to make a reusable component that maybe other developers can use or I can use in the future. And what we're going to do is pass in an array of the objects that we want to show in the navigation bar. That's really awesome, actually. This is really cool. Title. By the way, if you're new to web development, this has not been around. Meaning the ability to make highly reusable things. Web development is like the wild, wild west. You got a bajillion people doing a bajillion different things. It's not like iPhone development or Android development or even desktop development where really you've got one way to do something. Web development can get pretty nasty pretty quick. So the more modularized you can make it like this and redistributable is the more it becomes like desktop programming, which is absolutely fantastic. Object-oriented programming, it's just it's becoming great. React is very powerful, and I'm just adding the titles here. So again, these may change. We're just putting some test data in here. So we've got 3 objects. Each one has a title and an href, and right now the href isn't taking them anywhere, but that is fine. And so let's go ahead in our nav bar here and pretend. With React, remember when you're working with properties and stuff, you don't sometimes explicitly define the properties, you just pass them in and you assume that they're there. So we're going to say nav data. So we're going to pass in a prop, it's a property, and we're going to pass in nav links. Okay, so now our nav bar has a series of nav links. Okay, so let's go into our nav bar and let's think about what we want to do right here. So what we want to do is create a list item for every navigation item that's in that array, right? We want to, and we haven't again defined the data. We're just thinking off the top of our heads here. So let's create a function that will return to us a navigation item and pass in the appropriate data. So we're not going to need this here anymore. What I'm going to do is up here in my render function. I'm going to create another function, var create link item, okay? And this is just going to be a function that's going to be passed into the array map function that we use a lot in React. And it's going to have the data item, so that item in that array that we just created, and then the index. If you remember previously, I mentioned that React wants your arrays to have unique indexes. Don't just pass in static data. Because of the way the virtual DOM works with React, it may corrupt your data or put things in the wrong spot. So make sure you do put an index there. This will automatically provide you an index when you're using the map filter. It's an optional second parameter. So that's why I didn't make this up. The arrays map filter will pass in an index if you ask for the index there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to return nav item, and we're going to put in a key. Remember, this is the unique key, okay? And the unique key is going to be, we're going to say item.title plus index. We'll just make it an absolute unique key, okay? And the href is going to be equal to item.href. And if you're unfamiliar with what I'm doing here, I am just passing in properties, okay? These are just properties that are going down to our nav item, and I'm grabbing them from so this item.title right here, okay? I'm grabbing that from that array that is right here, okay? I'm assuming that it's going to be there, and then I'm creating a unique key with the index. I'm adding those two strings together, or those two items together, to make a string. And the href is a new property I'm passing down, which comes from the item as well too. So nothing crazy different here. And lastly, let's set a title. This is going to be equal to item.title. And is that it? I think that's it. So look at what we have here. Okay, make this a little bit smaller so it fits on the screen. Okay, so we've got a nav item, which we've imported, and we're passing in a unique key, so it plays well with React. Okay, the href, we want each of our links, our nav items, to have an href that you click on, it takes you somewhere, and we want each of those nav items to actually have a title. And so we're grabbing the title, and this function right here is what we're going to use for our map. Maybe you're thinking, well, we're not even calling the function. Well, we haven't called it yet. We're going to pass this into the map filter. Sometimes you've seen me just define it right here in line, but when it gets too long like that or complex, you're not going to want to do it all right here in line. And if you don't do it the right way, React will yell at you when it's compiling the JSX, which is why we put it up there. So let's go ahead and call it now. So we're going to say this.props.navdata. You with me so far? Main.jsx. Okay, it took props right here. This is a prop, remember? You had to assume that it existed. So we took nav links and we passed it into this prop called nav data. So in our nav bar, we're saying this.props.navdata, which is an array. Okay, that's an array. So we're calling the map function of that array. And remember, the map function will call each item it will be called every time for each item that's in the array. And so what function is it going to call? Well, we want it to call the function that we just created. This function up here, okay? We want it to call that for every single item. So what's going to happen is every item in this array is going to pass in an object, okay? This is the object right here. It's going to get passed in. It's also going to automatically pass in the index for us, and then it's going to grab the information out of it. So that's all that's happening here. You've seen it before. I'm just reiterating how it works. So we are creating a link item for each one of those. Of course, we are not done yet. Why are we not done yet? Because we have not handled in our link, in our A's, in our nav items, it's such a weird thing to say with HTML. You know, the A tag, the link tag, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we need to handle title and href in our nav item, as you can see right now. It is just a boring little list item here. Let's make it unboring. Okay, so we've got a list item and a test. Of course, we want the data inside of it to be the title, right? So this would be this dot. By the way, if you see me ever doing double curly braces, it's because I've got like Angular stuck in my brain. So that's how you do it in Angular. It's permanently ingrained. So this dot props dot title. Remember the nav bar passed in a title right here, a property called title. So we're going to grab that title, and that's what actually going to be shown to the user here. So that's cool. Let's make sure that works. Also, I kind of want to make sure, let's see, do we have, oh, the href, that's right. So we need a link in here as well too, right? Inside this list item. In fact, I think I probably did this wrong. The title here needs to be inside the link itself. So ahref equals this.props.href. Okay, there we go. And then this is where we do the end A. So we want this to be clickable, right? So we have the A inside of the list item like so. Let's just see if it works. If it worked out of the box, and I could have missed something, we should see 3 links: home, courses, and blog. Let's open up the terminal, make sure there's no errors. There are no errors. Refresh. Look at that. Pretty cool, huh? So we've got home, courses, and blog. Now, let me show you the power of this if you're not appreciating it just yet. So you just created this reusable navigation bar, okay? And you want to use it on your next project. Maybe your next project, you don't want home, courses, and blog. You want something else. So using the exact same code, navbar, nav item, without changing anything, all we're changing is our main entry point file, which is going to change on every application. Now we can say, you know, cool stuff. We could say hot gophers. Sometimes stuff just comes in my brain. And then we can say happy lamps, okay? And if I refresh my page, you're like, this guy's a friggin' weirdo. Yes, so look at that. Really cool. I hope you just saw the power of that. Highly reusable. And of course, if we scroll in, these should be there, which they are, and they are clickable. However, we want the background to be highlighted. Also, I'm not happy with the color. This is, you know, a faded looking, you know, or gradient color, and there's no colors here. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of life to our navigation bar now. We also want our colors and themes to be a little bit dynamic as well. Let me make this a little bit smaller here. So sometimes what I like to do when I'm working with React is just pretend the data exists. Like, I'm thinking to myself as a developer, if I want something reusable, let's pretend it exists and just pass it on down. So we've got the nav data. So let's say that we wanted to be able to dynamically change the color of the background of the navigation bar. So let's pretend that exists. So I'm just going to create a property called bg color, and let's make ours for right now. Let's make it red. Okay, so let's pretend it's red, and then the title color, you know, the color of the actual wording on the left-hand side, the main title. Let's make that white just for right now. We'll change these. I just want to kind of test it out. So let's pretend that there's a background color, title color. Oh, and what about link color, the color of the links? So I can say link color equals, and let's say, what's a good color? Let's say yellow for now, just for testing purposes. So I'm pretending these properties exist, and I'm passing data into them. Now, if it's going from the top down, the next logical step is to do it here in the nav bar, okay? And so we're assuming those properties exist, but how can we style our navigation bar? Because Bootstrap's already got some styling, or you may in your own program have CSS that's already applied to certain things. How can we apply these styles here? Well, of course, we can use the inline styling for our components, which is really cool. And my philosophy is, if you're building things that are reusable, do as much styling here as possible, okay? The reason being is it's decoupled, okay? Decoupled from your CSS, from everything else. The more styling you can do here, the cooler it is. And of course, you can always write your CSS to apply maybe application-wide. But think about reusability when you're creating components, okay? So let's go ahead and take care of this now. Nav style. Okay, so this is an object. Of course, this is React inline styling. And what I want to do is I want our little navigation bar to have some shadowing on it, so it looks nice and pops out a little more. So we're going to set some shadowing. Of course, if you are using shadowing, you need to make sure you support the different browsers. And so this is just like, you know, how back in the day what would you Mozilla dash, box dash shadow. That's the same thing here. Okay, when you're doing the browser specific shadowing or browser specific commands, CSS styling properties, that's the word I was looking for. You want to start it off with a capital letter, and that is on the React documentation. I'm not just making that up. And so you can just pass in a string and it will work, which is really cool, right? 0.000. All right, hold on. 000, comma. There we go, 0.4. So I'm just setting some values. I played around with this to get the feel that I was looking for, comma. And again, this is just CSS, just in JavaScript, which is amazing. I've been waiting for this day forever, and then it happened when React came out. Being able to keep as much in the code as possible. 0, 0, 0. Okay, and then we're going to say 0.4 for opacity. And then box shadow. Again, we're supporting the different browsers, right? So you've got WebKit, which is the Safari. Then you've got the Mozilla. We're not worrying about Internet Explorer. And then box shadow, of course, is the default box shadow. So we start with a lowercase. And that's going to be 004px RGBA 000, comma 0.4. And lastly, if you notice, I don't know if you can see it, but if you notice on our webpage, the corners on the left here and on the right are slightly rounded. It's really hard to see because the screen's so white, but Bootstrap is rounding the corners and I don't like it. I want it to be completely flush with the edges here. So I'm going to turn off border radius because these styles will override the Bootstrap. And I'm going to put a 0 there. That one's not in a string. Okay. Although I could have put it in a string, but I'm not. And you don't need to define the actual PX or anything there. So that's our navigation bar styling. I just wanted to do a little bit of cleanup here. Now we need to take care of our BG color and title color. Okay, so let's do that now. So this is the nav bar and we've got a background color. So what we can do is write some conditional code here. So if this.props.bg color, so if the user passed this in, we're making this optional. How cool is that? If you don't want to pass into color, fine, you don't have to. But if you did, let's handle it. So if it does exist, nav style.background. Okay, now the background, this is the background property in CSS. It's going to go right here into our CSS styling object. And this will override the Bootstrap. Background color does not override the Bootstrap because Bootstrap uses background. We're going to say this.props.bg color. Now we are assuming that the user passed in something valid that we can actually use, but that's okay. If you wanted to write more error handling, you could, like parsing it out, making sure that it's a proper color. So let's work with that here first. So navstyle.background. Okay. So let's go ahead and where do we want to put this? Do we want to put it on the header? I think we just want to put it here on the main nav here. And I'm going to say style equals nav style. So I'm just passing in the styling that we created right here. Okay. So if this worked, we should see a red background. Okay. Because we've just passed it in. We checked if it's there. And if it is there, we add it to the styling object and we pass the styling object here. Let's look at our terminal, make sure there's no errors. And there are not. Here's the moment of truth. Refresh. It is a nice, ugly red. Woo, that's really ugly. And okay, we got a little bit of shadowing there in a box. You notice how the corners are no longer rounded, which is what I wanted. Really cool. So we just created a dynamic property that a user can pass in, almost like a class in an object-oriented programming. How pretty dang cool is that? I think it's pretty dang cool. Okay, so that was our background color. What else did we have? We've got a title color. Okay, so we never set that, so let's do that now as well too. We can say if this.props.title color, all right, title, let's see, oops, this would be, this is actually right here on our navbar header, if you can see that right there. So I think we're going to need to put it into a different styling object here. Let's do that right here. Var, we're going to say title style. Just make it an empty object for now because I don't need anything else in it. Then I can say title style dot, this would just be color because it is the color property for the font. And we're going to say this dot props dot title color. And then right here, we want to set the, I believe it's on this guy right here on our navbar header. We want to set the actual, actually no, that's a link. We want to set it here on our link. So we're going to say style equals, and we're going to say title style. So we're putting that on our actual the A, okay? So if it worked, it should be white. Let's look at our code. That looks good. Refresh the page. It is now white. Okay, so now you're starting to see how you can start making dynamic data, how you can pass it down to your components, which is pretty dang cool. Okay, so Link color, we haven't tested that one out yet, right? We got a link color, yellow. So let's do that as well now too. So let's say var link style. Okay. And again, we'll just put this right here. If this dot props dot link color, okay, then we're going to say link style dot color equals this dot props dot color, or that not color dot link color. Okay, so this one's going to be handled a little bit differently because we're not directly applying it here. We're passing it down onto one of the descendants, one of the children. So where would we do that? Well, we would pass it in as a property. Now, we're not going to want to use the style property on this nav item here because we don't want to style this. We want to style the actual element itself. So what I can do, and you can do all kinds of things. I'm just going to say a style for the actual the a inside of it. Does that make sense? I'm just sending down a prop. This is just a prop, and this prop is going to be the link style object we created. So this may be empty, it may not be. Who knows? It depends if the developer wanted to pass in data into it. We're passing that in as a property, okay? Link style. So if we go over here into our nav item, okay, let's look at this right here. So if we want it to work, what we're going to do is right here, we're going to say style equals, this time it's style, right? This is the actual style property. We're going to say this dot props dot, and it was a style. Okay, so we grabbed it from the props, we passed it into here. This is where we want the actual style object. If this worked as we wanted it to, it should be yellow, right? I think it's right here. Yellow. Link color should be yellow. Let's make sure we've got no errors. We don't. Look at that, coming together. Now, if we were building a really ugly red and yellow website, we would be making progress. But this is cool. We've got some really customizable stuff that you can pass in. It's still yellow there. This is looking great. Okay, so this is cool. We can finish this off right now, be done with it. And we'll move in the next video. What we're going to do is we're actually going to clean up the actual styling so it applies to our website, and we're going to handle the hovering. But again, to reemphasize, the reason why this is so powerful is because you can reuse this. The more code you can reuse, the quicker you'll get applications out. And by the way, this is the whole philosophy behind React. Facebook is really, really big on not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. And that's why they designed it this way. So if this is kind of like, you know, tugging at your, like, this is not how I was taught, this just doesn't feel right, I've been doing CSS and HTML and JavaScript forever. You know, if you're thinking those things, I want you to think about all the times that you've had to rewrite code and how painful it can be, and how this is going to take a lot of that time off. So that's the whole point behind React and React Native, is the ability to not have to keep rewriting things over and over and over again. So embrace it, appreciate it, and let's go ahead and move on and forward. And remember, to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on chat room. I'm there all the time, as well as a huge community of other students.